Hello and welcome to The Edition from The Spectator. I'm Lara Prendergast, The Spectator's executive editor, and the latest issue of the magazine, our Christmas issue, has just gone to press. It looks magnificent, with a lineup including everyone from Peter Thiel to Nigel Farage, Joan Collins to Matthew McConaughey, Her Majesty The Queen to Bonnie Blue, amongst many others. To discuss everything in this bumper issue of the magazine, I'm joined now by our deputy political editor, James Heale, our associate editor, Damian Thompson, and the editor of our morning press newsletter, Angus Colwell. Thank you all for joining. James, I thought I'd start with you. You've written a brilliant poll call in this Christmas issue, and in it you look at the people who've had a good year and a bad year. What would you say are the highlights from this year politically?
Well, politically, I think that it's not very Christmassy, but the song of the year has to be I Will Survive. And really it is this kind of dance between Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, and Kemi and Keir, the leader of the opposition, and their two respective brands, which you've had these two long-time established parties that have dominated British politics for a century or more. And now it seems that increasingly they're getting challenged in this fragmentation. And the big question really is which of them is going to have a worse year. And I think personally it's going to be Keir Starmer, hence talking about the potential for the Prime Minister to lose his job less than 24 months after winning a landslide victory.
You say he's had a better year on the foreign side of things. Could he find some solace in that this Christmas?
Well, yes, normally it takes a second term for a Prime Minister to suddenly realise how much they love foreign affairs and how much they love this country and want to spend more time away from it. And so I think that what we've really done is speed run that experiment, and it's got to the point where Keir Starmer, in his second year in office, is now doing things that took sort of Tony Blair 4, 5, 6, 7 years to do, which is namely try and throw himself onto the international stage, take over from the Foreign Office, the running of international policy. He has some basis for this in terms of the Ukraine crisis, and obviously a lot has been happening on the world stage in terms of Gaza. But I do think it's the sign of a Prime Minister who has much more interest in that, much more instinctively passion for that than the kind of minutiae of day-to-day politics and economic thinking as well.
Angus, earlier this year you wrote your piece about the ultras and you looked at Zach Polansky. He's had a fairly good year, hasn't he?
He has had a really good year. He's had an interesting past week. I don't know if anyone else saw on Question Time where he was trying to be pro-immigration, and he said, well, lots of immigrants join our care sector. Now, they wipe people's bums. I don't know about you, but I don't want to wipe any bums. And he sort of ended up arguing for a serf underclass to be imported to... But, you know, Polansky, I mean, Matthew Parris at the Times today mentions that he was hearing young people on the tube talking about Polansky. I see on Instagram, I think Polansky's sort of mental, but I see on Instagram, friends liking all of his posts. He's had an amazing year, and he's kind of really stolen the left-wing limelight away from Jeremy Corbyn, who just failed to take control of your party. Zara Sultano, increasingly ridiculous. So, yeah, on the fringes, I mean, the sort of bifurcation of British politics, the dividing into multiple parties, I think really is the story of the year. Of course, Reform started the year quite well with the grooming gangs, I mean, we're still talking about grooming gangs at the end of the year. But you've seen sort of the Lib Dems doing OK. You've got Reform now. You've got Rupert Lowe. I was reading Portrait of the Week. I forgot about the Rupert Lowe row when he left Reform. That seemed like the biggest thing ever at the time. Now it's, and then your party and the Greens. I mean, we're properly, I think this is the year that it'll be known as we've entered proper multi-party politics.
And of course, also, I went to write the column, I went back and I read all the past 10 Christmas poll calls, and it's always interesting seeing what was written about the upcoming year and what actually turned out to be sort of key things and the dogs that didn't bark. And looking back to last year's one, no one could have foreseen Zach Polansky as a figure, this sort of ex-Liberal Democrat who said some rather wacky things about women's breasts. He was going to be the surprise package of the year, and yet that seems to be the case at the end of this year. He's striking fear into Labour benches. And while, for instance, Nigel Farage has been at this game for many, many years, and clearly a well-established insurgent, if that can be such a thing. Zach Polansky, I think, is the kind of surprise package and the interesting one to watch when we come into 2026.
Well, I don't mind if he's successful, just so long as he steals the limelight from Britain's most repugnant extremist left-wing party leader, who is the ghastly Sir Ed Davey, who reminds me of a sort of sinister clown at a children's party.
Mr. Tumble.
He is constantly popping up on Twitter. He was holding a chainsaw the other day. I think it was about red tape. I mean, the idea of Liberal Democrats getting rid of red tape. But I loathe the man so much, I was kind of hoping for a Texas Chainsaw scenario, Texas Chainsaw Massacre scenario, which Ed Davey is the victim. I just find it hard to put into words how much I dislike the Liberal Democrats and how pompous, preposterous and sinister, I find Sir Ed. And it appalls me how quickly we've forgotten his behaviour over the post office scandal.
Indeed. I think it's interesting that the Lib Dems was once described as the bed blockers of British politics, and sort of, actually, they feature very little in this column because they have 72 MPs, and yet it's almost, what do we stand for? Managed incrementalism. It's not exactly the rallying cry, but for some in Liberal England who are looking around and thinking, I'm not really a fan of this government or the last one, he's the best they've got.
They've always been the great opportunists of British politics.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember they were famous for fighting dirty on the doorstep. Back in the 60s, they'd play the race card in working class boroughs. They'd attempt to be more Tory than the Tories in... they'd play the race card in those boroughs as well. But I remember covering this is before the Liberal Democrats were even officially formed, I think, but I remember covering a parish council that they ran. A town council it was called, but that was technically just a parish council. And they were so, they couldn't discuss dog turds on the pavement without sounding fascist. Horrible party.
James, also in your column, you say that reports of the death of Tory England have been exaggerated before. Do you think they're being exaggerated now?
I think that some of the more hyperbolic claims about it are certainly far too soon. The Conservative Party has a huge amount still of intellectual, social, political capital invested in it. Lots of clever people working only a few streets away from us here at The Spectator to try and ensure the great comeback of this party. But I do think that there are equally those who are being far too blasé about it. Who go, oh, we've always come back, so we will this time. And actually you think, well, they said the similar about the progressive Conservatives in Canada in the 1990s. It's a similar thing happening across Europe with the Gaullists in France, for instance. The centre-right all across the world is facing serious challenge. In Australia, for instance, where they've got the One Nation Party challenging the Liberals there. So I do think that there are still some people who need to get real, and I think May will be the crunch point for this year. And if you're seeing the Tory party getting 15% across the country and getting wiped out in different areas, you do wonder how are they going to have the ground troops, the kind of activist base to mobilise and build back for 2028 or 9.
Well, Tim Shipman has interviewed Nigel Farage and he mentions May the 6th and he says that Farage believes it's his moment of destiny. Angus, do you think Farage comes across as quite sort of bullish and could that be a risk for him?
I mean, he always does. I mean, there's been a strange thing. Someone said in our editorial conference the other day, the Reform have done that thing that teams often do in football matches, which they've sort of gone 2-0 up after 20 minutes. And anyone that follows football knows you go there and go, yes, God, this is great. And then you go, there's a lot of time left. There is a lot of time left. I mean, bar some unforeseen thing. There's still a couple of years away from a general election. 2021, Boris did great in the locals. And look what happened to him 3 years later. Well, actually, no, it wasn't the locals. It was the Hartlepool by-election. But anyway, these elections, many years away. Farage is always going to sound bullish, but he has to just keep the energy going. He's got a long time he's got to keep this energy going for, and he can't let it flag, and, that's he's in fighting form with Tim. Yeah,
and he's a bit of a sort of shark. He has to keep moving forward. And, of course, the whole point being is that he wants to say the Tories are dead. He wants to encourage sort of the pendulum to swing over to him, the critical mass of sort of ex-Tories coming over to him. And as long as he can keep that up and sort of suggest that the intellectual and political headwinds are with him, that sort of will keep him going, because they know it's 2029 or bust, I'd say.
And it's because Tim actually visits the Reform office and he says it has this new sort of professionalism to it. Are you convinced by that, Damian, that they are becoming a more professional party?
Well, I'm enormously impressed by Nigel's energy because we're the same age and I don't know how he does it. And not only that, but I gave up drinking, as I constantly remind people, I gave up drinking 30-odd years ago and he certainly hasn't. I remember he used to be involved with the Telegraph blogs, podcast. And Nigel would come in with what he confessed was an absolutely monstrous hangover, and yet not a sign of it in his delivery, his confidence, his joie de vivre. And I just remember the days when I used to have to sort of hide in the corner and find an office to go down and lie and cry in, basically, when I had a hangover that bad. That's the thing that always impresses me about him. How does he do it?
Does he drink as much as we might think he does?
Yeah, well, he did the time I took him out to dinner. Yeah.
But nowadays he can't, surely.
I think he maybe doesn't have as many PFLs as he once did, perhaps. He's very, very busy. But he does still have time to put it away. That being said, I mean, as I wrote in one column earlier this year that sort of, like Harold Wilson, he actually prefers a pipe. Or Harold Wilson preferred cigars to pipes. But
and cigarettes as well. He used to get out a packet of packet of ciggies.
So,
Yeah.
so Farage sometimes has a pipe in the mornings when he's plotting stuff, and he also prefers, I think, wine sometimes than pints of beer, which maybe he once was sort of 10, 20 years ago, but he's still putting it away from what all signs point to that, I'd say.
Just finally on politics, Tim mentions the defection of Danny Kruger. He also says that there's some talk about Robert Jenrick crossing the floor. Do you think that seems plausible, James?
I think it all depends on May and what happens then. I think that Robert Jenrick is someone who's certainly pledged his loyalty to Kemi Badenoch, but equally there are certain people around Robert Jenrick, some of whom went over to Reform over the past 12, 15 months or so when he didn't get the leadership. They would certainly like to see him come across, and I think it all depends on whether, if Kemi Badenoch faces a challenge after May, what all happens with that. But it's certainly something that allies of Jenrick and Nigel Farage have been talking about over the past few months.
Moving on, Angus, you, for this issue, have interviewed the British physicist David Deutsch, and you start your piece by saying that you've looked through the Amazon reviews of his latest book, and you say they read less like reviews of a book about physics and more like they were written by a weepy widow.
Yeah.
Who is he, for people who aren't aware, and why does he provoke such an emotional response in people?
He's this really idiosyncratic and unique physicist. The New Yorker in 2012 did a big long profile of him, and they opened with the sentence, "On the outskirts of Oxford lives a brilliant and distressingly thin physicist named David Deutsch, who believes in multiple universes and has conceived of an as yet unbuildable computer to test their existence." That is who he is. He told me that he's always wanted to be a scientist since he was about 3 or 4, since he knew what one was. Yeah, I think his 2 books are called The Fabric of Reality and The Beginning of Infinity. He rejects this kind of specialism. He has specialisms in sort of quantum mechanics and multiple universes and many worlds and things like that. But he thinks that it's the duty, I believe, of scientists, and people like Richard Dawkins have been doing this as well, to explain, to work out what science can be as a method of inquiry and not sort of all theory. I mean, I read the beginning of his book, The Beginning of Infinity, which is the favourite book of Sam Altman, the OpenAI chief. And it's just this wonderfully optimistic argument that humanity can accumulate knowledge. I mean, he doesn't believe in progress as an inevitable law or anything like that. But he believes that we are wonderful. And I don't think that, you know, as AI enters our economy more and more, it's going to be quite hard to cling on to sort of what is human. And I think that David Deutsch represents science as a humanity as well as sort of anything to do with experimentation and rigour and all that kind of thing.
And what did you make of him as a person?
He's very charming. He's very nice. He sort of seems to be very allergic to orthodoxy. So he has this in politics, where he's a scientist that will openly... We had a very interesting conversation about multiculturalism. Now, most academic scientists will stray away from that. You know, even a couple of years ago, it would have been worse in case they get cancelled. But he has this amazingly measured way of speaking that can only be because he's put a great deal of thought into these things. Where he says multiculturalism is a system of reducing intellectual diversity and making for a monoculture, you know, which is a much more... I mean, we've all... you know, heard sort of like a lot of woke bashing, as they call it, and sometimes it can feel, you know, slightly rote learned, slightly sort of off there. But he's a deep thinker. He's very excised about the Chagos Islands as well. But no, he's completely allergic to orthodoxy, and all the more interesting conversation for it.
May I say, I thought Angus's article fabulous, fully up to the challenge of capturing this extraordinary man. And I like this bit. He's an unashamedly human-centric philosophy, or his is an unashamedly human-centric philosophy. He writes that we have never merely been the Earth's passengers, nor, as it often said, its stewards, nor even its maintenance crew. We're its designers and builders. Before the designs created by humans, it wasn't a vehicle, but only a heap of dangerous raw materials. And then you add, I'm reminded of the old joke of looking out at the infinite stars in the night sky and realising how insignificant they are compared to me.
Yeah.
Which is lovely.
Right,
There's one thing I wanted to ask you about, something I didn't quite buy in his arguments. He says that the Enlightenment is the point at which progress happens at a speed that people will be aware of progress happening in their own lifetimes. I think that happened certainly with the invention of printing. It happened a couple of centuries earlier. It happened during the Reformation, during the Renaissance. And it's a particular hobby horse of mine. I think so much of the Enlightenment notion of progress is actually builds on religious utopianism, religious millenarianism, the idea of liberty, equality, and fraternity, an equal and prosperous society, ever more sophisticated and advanced, is essentially just yet another iteration of the millennium, the rule of the saints, a period of unbelievable prosperity, which is sometimes follows extraordinary convulsions, and of course the Enlightenment philosophers experienced and built into their theories the French Revolution. So I didn't quite agree with him about that, but what a fascinating article, and his comments about multiculturalism, I think, would have been less surprising 2 or 3 years ago than they are now, and that's a very good sign.
Yes. Yeah, well, this is an argument about, the Enlightenment that I was listening to actually Tom Holland make the other day, that a lot of these things are Christian values in another guise, and that really we're sort of superimposing or retrospectively imposing a slightly more fertile intellectual culture than there actually, was. He's a scientist, and so I guess it was the great age of scientists, so maybe there's some fondness for that.
You also talked to him about AI, and we also have an interview with Peter Thiel in which he is talking about AI. How did their two positions on it compare?
They both sort of love technology and love, Peter Thiel has spoken before about how we're in a great stagnation, his famous quote is, we wanted flying cars, but we got 140 characters, So you'd think that they're going to love AI and be really on board with it. They're actually more sceptical about it, Peter Thiel, in his interview with 3 of our team.
3 of our Gen Z.
3 of our Gen Z, yeah.
Specifically requested by
Yes,
Thiel.
well, quite right. Yeah, he says that AI has become a bit of a buzzword, it's lazy thinking. And he's always been very good with that, Thiel. I remember he said that he asks people in interviews, what's the most unfashionable belief that you hold? He wants to get beyond, the now. And David Deutsch sort of says that he's not entirely sure that we are anywhere near artificial general intelligence, which is when AI is sort of as good as a human at cross-capability tasks. Thiel is also a bit more sceptical about it as well, and I think what we're going to have coming into the next year, into 2026, is more and more speculation of whether we're in an AI bubble. You're seeing certain people, sell their stock in the sort of final months of this year, and I don't want to give investment advice. Who on earth knows if it is going to be a bubble? But should it burst in 2026, that I think really will be the major story of the first half of the year. I mean, there were some calculations in the budget. It would wipe loads of our fiscal headroom off if that much of stock market value went. So maybe it would be interesting to heed these guys' cautionary notes about AI.
I do think he talks a lot of bollocks, actually, Peter Thiel, a lot of the time. I mean, I remember watching his interview with Ross Douthat on the New York Times podcast, and Ross Douthat said he was maybe the most influential right-wing philosopher or thinker of our times, and I thought, God help us all, because Thiel believes things such as, he thinks that the arc of progress, whatever happens to an arc, it was broken or reversed itself or whatever. In 1969, he said, we put men on the moon, and then there was Woodstock, and the hippies took over, and they suppressed innovation, and now they've turned into a sort of global risk-averse antichrist. And I was thinking, what on earth is he on about?
I don't look at Woodstock and see risk-averse people either.
Good point.
I mean, the president that year was Nixon, right? I mean, it was hardly. It's this whole idea about sort of who actually won the 60s and 70s. It's a very kind of California view of sort of what things actually matters.
The detail I love about that is that Nixon declared a war on drugs during his second term, I think it was. And one of the entertainers who supported him vigorously in this was Elvis. There's a picture of Elvis and Nixon together in the White House.
Yes.
Elvis at the time was absolutely rattling with every prescription drug known to man, which shortened his life in the end.
Absolutely.
Because it caused constipation and...
Was it 46 or something like that? He died of tragedy.
Yeah, and he died in unfortunate circumstances that were not unconnected with the constipation caused by enormous numbers of opioids. I'll leave it there.
Well, we are going to talk about another great intellect, albeit a fictional one now, because we're going to talk about your piece, Damian. You've written a brilliant piece in the Christmas issue about how you are a very devoted Sherlock Holmes fan, a Sherlockian, as you put it. Could you give us a bit of an outline of where that obsession began
Well,
and
I'm
where it's got
Sherlockian,
to.
but I'm not a real Sherlockian, because to be a real Sherlockian, you have to be a member of the Baker Street Irregulars. That is a society based in New York, because Sherlockian obsession reaches its pinnacle in the United States. And the Baker Street Irregulars are invitation only. There's about 300 of them. And they put BSI after their names. They're named after the gang of street urchins whom Sherlock Holmes uses. I mean, they're only mentioned 2 or 3 times in the canon, as we call it. But they're headed by Wiggins, and that's the name. Whoever heads the BSI in New York is known as Wiggins. And what's extraordinary is the Sherlockian community in America. I'd say it's like a cult, but if it's like a cult, it's a very healthy cult, because it's immense. There's people from every single background, every conceivable background, discussing every tiny aspect of the 56 short stories and 4 novels written by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, and in particular trying to reconcile difficulties caused by Conan Doyle's slightly slapdash approach to writing Holmes stories, because they were nice learners for him, but he thought they distracted him from more important things like his unreadable historical novels. So, Holmes and Watson will set out for the theatre in July and arrive there on a foggy September evening.
Damian, how does your knowledge rank among the Sherlockians? I mean, when you talk to them, are you sort of mid-ranking? Are you one of the experts? Or do you feel, like when I sometimes compare with some of the great men of the lobby political trivia, I feel almost sort of like a rank amateur?
I've been doing this since the 1970s.
Right, OK. So
you
hold your own.
My own with
right,
them.
OK, yeah.
But I'll never be a Baker Street.
What are the main arguments? You mentioned there's a discussion about whether Holmes went to Oxford or Cambridge. What are the other big points of contention?
The game, which is, it has to be played very solemnly, and the Americans play it with that special solemn gusto that you get whenever Americans pick up Anglophile enthusiasms. It began in 1911 when the future Monsignor Ronald Knox presented to a group of undergraduates at Trinity College, Oxford, studies in the literature of Sherlock Holmes or something like that. And what he was doing, he was parodying earnest attempts by Protestant theologians to tear apart the Gospels by pointing out discrepancies in them. So he drew attention to the fact that Dr. Watson appeared to have been, I can't remember which discrepancy he pointed out, a lot of them to do with dates. And one of the things that's pointed out is that was Watson married once or twice, because Watson apparently loses his wife while Holmes has disappeared off the Reichenbach Falls, only to reappear. And Holmes commiserates with him on his bereavement, and then that puts Dr. Watson back quite safely in Baker Street for the rest of the stories, which carried on appearing until the 1920s. Problem is that in one of the stories, The Blanched Soldier, set in 1902, Sherlock Holmes, who is telling the story rather very unusually, says the good Watson had at the time deserted me for a wife, one of the few selfish things I can remember in our association. And people go, hang on, Mary Mawson died in 1894, so it must be a second wife. And some scholars have examined the dates so carefully that they've concluded that Dr. Watson married 5 times.
Are either of you Sherlockians, even amateurish ones?
We're going to say, have you married 5 times?
Yeah, have you?
No.
I don't know what you're missing, boys.
I know. Well, I'll make it even worse. My only real exposure to Sherlock is the Cumberbatch Martin Freeman show when it came out.
Started well and then became sort of preachy and pretentious. And if you want a fun updating, a really marvellously fun updating of the Sherlock Holmes stories, then listen to the Goalhangers podcast, Sherlock & Co., which is audio only, which has Dr. Watson as a chirpy, chippy, slightly left-of-centre army vet.
Lib Dem.
He's, I think, probably more Labour than Lib Dem. But his mother's a Tory, Carol Watson. She's a Daily Mail reader, but it's satirised so beautifully without being that sort of snooty, let's all laugh at the Tories type thing. Holmes is autistic and probably gay, and there's a third member of the team, Mariana, who's this young Spanish female accountant, and it works absolutely brilliantly because the scripts are absolutely razor sharp. You get sort of toilet humour and political satire and moments of real chilling horror. I mean, this may be the most frightening adaptation of Hound of the Baskervilles ever. And actually, it's always better when you have an audio adaptation, because the problem with TV and film versions of The Hound of the Baskervilles is you've got to make a hound look really frightening, and that can go very badly wrong, and it always does. But, you know, just to give you an example, in their updating of Silver Blades, there's sort of 10 seconds of fake Joe Rogan. It's done so wonderfully that alone is worth the price of admission.
Speaking of books, we also have Her Majesty the Queen giving her list of her favourite books to read and to give as presents at Christmas. James, what did you make of the Queen's list?
I haven't read the bloody list. Sorry, I'm so sorry.
No, I haven't yet either.
Angus, what did you make of the list?
It was interesting. There's William Boyd. There's sort of authors in there who will be appearing in Christmas wrapping plenty of times this year. I'd have liked maybe, you know, some slightly more controversial ones. It'd be great if the Queen just randomly came out and sort of Thomas Pynchon's Gravity's Rainbow, or like, you know, like Martin Amis or something like that. But no, I mean, you know, the Queen has been encouraging reading for several years now. I think she's done it in the Spectator before even. I think it's something that she's going with an increasingly popular tide. You know, there's the No Phones in Schools campaign. And so the monarchy on this one are keeping up with the zeitgeist, I think.
And as I mentioned at the start, we have got a rather eccentric lineup. We've got Her Majesty the Queen. We've also got Bonnie Blue, who's written a quite inspiring notebook in many ways. She sort of talks about all sorts of things. She talks about her interest in war films, inheritance tax, and why she's coming out for reform. James, were you surprised to hear about that from her?
Well, I thought it was a really interesting piece about the ups and downs, ins and outs of her life. And I think that, the key newsline, of course, in all this is her comments on inheritance tax and the fact, actually, that she rather likes Nigel Farage's policy on stopping the boats. So Bonnie Blue is increasingly Bonnie Teal.
And I had that awfully embarrassing moment when we were chatting before the camera started rolling, when I asked you who Bonnie Blue was. And I suddenly realised I've reached the age at which High Court judges used to say, and who or what are the Beatles?
Well, Dominic Sandbrook in his diary in the Christmas issue says that she is the 21st century's answer to Emma Hamilton.
Dominic Sandbrook is one of the stars of Sherlock & Co. He's a wonderful actor. And he plays, for example, Barrymore in The Hound of the Baskervilles. He plays a number of roles fabulously well. Just thought I'd mention that, because I didn't realise. I said, the same Dominic Sandbrook, it is.
Well, I've been enjoying... Dominic Sandbrook is currently down in Australia watching the England team get absolutely annihilated by Australia. And if I could point out, one of my favourite things, or definitely favourite names in the magazine, is Andrew Strauss, the great England captain, the last England captain to win Down Under. Has done a notebook for us in which he defends Bazball. The interesting thing is I sometimes wonder whether Spectator readers will read this at various points over Christmas. It's feasible that they could read Andrew Strauss's stirring defence of the current England regime once it's been confirmed it's a 5-0 Australia series whitewash. So, I mean, we've still got 3 left.
They could be fighting back.
If England win the next 3, we still win the Ashes, but 2-0 down. But no, it's great to see Andrew Strauss in the Spectator.
That's an inspiring Love Actually style film I want to see, actually. You know, cricket, the Ashes at December. It feels so wrong in some ways.
I know. I'm looking... Have you ever stayed up for the Boxing Day test? I never have, but I think I'm going to try this year.
I think this year might be the one.
2:30 a.m. Come on.
I wanted to ask you about cocktails, because we have various drinks mentioned in the magazine. We have Farage talking about his slow gin cocktail. You mentioned Sherlock Tales, Damian. We have Matthew McConaughey, who has a lovely recipe for a tequila cocktail. And we have various other mentions of drink scattered throughout the magazine. Damian, I know you don't drink, but is there a non-alcoholic cocktail that you like to drink at this time of year?
Cocktails, there are these 2-hour analyses of the Sherlock Holmes stories presented by on YouTube, presented by the wonderful Ed Pettit from the Rosenbach Museum in Philadelphia, and it's for his show that Mary Alcarid mixes these Sherlock tales. And somebody said to me, I gave up drinking in '94. As I keep reminding people, having won the drunkest person at the Spectator Party Award.
We need to do that this Christmas.
Ever won in my entire life. But the thing is, he mixes the Sherlock tales. Somebody asked me, do you, when you're surrounded by people drinking alcohol, do you feel the urge to drink? And the answer is no, I don't. But when I see people drinking on television, for some reason that triggers it, and particularly when I see Ed Pettit pouring himself a Sherlock tale and saying, oh my God, this is delicious, got a big white beard. Oh my God, this is good. I start shifting rather uneasily and looking wistfully at this mixture.
James, do you have a go-to Christmas cocktail?
Christmas cocktail, I mean, with eggnog, is that counts? That's just very basic. That's just sort of PG-12 cocktail. Yeah, I like that. I'm not really that fussy, if I'm honest. So, I mean, it could be anything from a gin and tonic to a sort of Tom Collins. In my house, we're very simple people. We'll drink anything.
Angus?
You need to be very fussy about these things. The only time of the year I really do this is on Christmas Day. Towards the end, I pour myself whiskey, neat. I don't like with ice. It's usually, we've got this Glenmorangie that knocks about. They do a lovely Christmas. Freddie Gray, our deputy editor, had put me onto it a couple of years ago. He bought the Glenmorangie Christmas jumper. It's the most delicious tasting thing. It tastes like butter. So I always like to have a glass of whiskey on Christmas Day.
Very civilised.
Just one.
Just one, maybe two. Three is trouble. It's,
See, I wouldn't be able to stop. I wasn't able to stop famously, so I had to stop.
What do you drink instead, Damian?
Kind of nothing, basically.
Water?
I mean, nothing compares to alcohol, to be honest.
We need a segment sponsored by drink at this point. Cut to commercial.
No, when I did Dry January, like a couple of years, I've done it for the past couple of years, and nothing really works. You know, I mean, you just have to just drink water. I mean, like the worst things are the 0% Guinnesses, which sort of, by tasting quite like a Guinness, but sort of not quite, you only remind yourself of how much you like actual Guinness.
Oh God, people give me these non-alcoholic wines, and I think, look. You know, I never drank them for the taste anyway. You idiots.
A fellow lobby correspondent of mine did Dry January this year and turned to me after about a week and went, just realised how many of the people in Westminster are incredibly boring. And you just realise that actually it's just sort of numbing the pain.
Actually, James, that is one of the things about booze. It makes boring people interesting.
Yeah.
It used to make me very, very boring, though, apparently, according to people who ran into me.
I wanted to also mention Rupert Hawksley, who's written a lovely notes on washing up. And I was going to ask you all about your Christmas Day and who does the washing up, Angus?
No comment.
It's me. I can't cook. I don't bring much to the table. Bountiful enthusiasm, little aptitude, and a pair of hands to do the washing up after my mum has made the roast.
See, I used to do the washing up, but doing the cooking is much better. You can sort of go into your own zone on Christmas Day, pretend you're some kind of
that's
artiste.
if it's just you, if you're some sort of dictator, lord of the kitchen. But with that, they've got family walking in, and now it's incredibly stressful. It's like the bear or something.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in our house, it's basically, I know what I'm good at.
Yeah.
And that means,
are you good at stacking dishwashers? I can't see that.
I become like the sort of, there's a wonderful description, I think it's from Test the D'Urbervilles, when they become like the scythe in the field, you know. Yeah. And that's basically me. My hands become an extension of the dishwasher and swinging the dishes from side to side and getting in. So I do become, and I think, you know, sort of, I become quite a mechanised tool of it all. So that's my role before the King's speech at 3:00.
Yeah.
I'm afraid that the whole washing up thing was the source of some of the most apocalyptic family rows in the history of the Thompson family, which is saying something with me, because my father and I unfortunately didn't get on. But he would do the washing up. We didn't have a dishwasher. We could have had. They were around, but out of sheer sort of, you know, you'd think they had some sort of Protestant work ethic, my devoutly Catholic parents. So my father would do the washing up and he'd make me dry the dishes. And since we couldn't stand the sight of each other, and since he was never satisfied by the standard of drying, probably rightly, that his only son offered, there was many an unhappy confrontation in our kitchen.
But I accept my role in this system. I am simply an aunt to the queen of the house, and I've just got to...
That's what my parents wanted. They spent, you know, their whole lives trying to get me to accept my role in the system.
But you rebelled.
If you can call it rebelling. It wasn't very entertaining for anybody.
That brings us neatly on to the final piece I wanted to mention, which is Philip Hensher, who's written about miserable literary depictions of Christmas. And he talks about Anthony Trollope's Orley Farm and says that it reminds us that for many of us, Christmas is all very nice once it's over. Do you feel that way, Damian?
It's kind of sad time. There's no getting round this. You know, when you reach my age, so many people are dead that they do rather, the ghosts of Christmas do rather intrude on the thing. Anybody will tell you. I mean, there's no getting around it. And I will be thinking this Christmas about people who were around this time last year who I wasn't expecting to have gone. Sorry, that's not very cheerful, is it? But I will also be thinking with nostalgia about some of the Christmases of my youth, particularly the awful, wonderfully cheesy 1970s Christmas TV. And people talk about Morecambe & Wise Christmas specials, but they were actually quite clever. But I like the really cheesy ones, such as, Bruce Forsyth and Generation Game Christmas special. This was the first time he did it. Then he was succeeded by Larry Grayson, which I didn't like Larry Grayson as much. What people forget, it was a brief period when Peter Hitchens presented the Generation Game in between the two of them.
I've never seen this.
The viewers didn't like it because, they had a conveyor belt with the cheese made and things like that. Well, Peter Hitchens kept on sort of confiscating things from the conveyor belt because he thought they might be corrupted by consumer...
There is a touch of the Ebenezer about Peter Hitchens. Yeah. So we at our family, we watch...
Nice to see you. Nice. We never really caught on.
Well, in that kind of spirit, that Mormon spirit, I mean, we watch war films in our house. I remember my sort of age 6, 7 as a boy.
Did you just believe what I told you about Peter Hitchens presenting the Generation?
I did, yeah.
Fabulous!
Is that not real?
Oh, that's made my Christmas. You've got to keep it in.
Got to keep that in.
I did think, I was amazed James... I was amazed James didn't know.
And he'll be so cross.
I was amazed James didn't know. He will get something on Twitter, yeah.
Taking liberties with the truth, I quite like war films, and I remember at age 6 or 7 sort of bawling my eyes out at the end of The Great Escape when Dad goes, "Oh, that was a great Christmas film, wasn't it?" So they just had all these machine gunned, these war heroes. But there is something about certain films at Christmas, associated with television at certain points of your life. I think that's what I'll be thinking about, sort of probably wasting many of my hours over Christmas watching terrible things that appealed to me 20 years ago.
You and Bonnie Blue, because she mentioned she's a big fan of a war film at Christmas.
Bonnie, if you're
She's
watching
out of
this...
jail.
Ooh!
Exactly.
She did the Generation Game after Peter.
Almost redeemed yourself.
Almost. Sometime.
I also wanted to mention briefly Joan Collins, who's done a lovely notebook comparing Christmas in LA and London. And I wondered if I could ask you all for your favourite places in London at this time of year for Christmas.
Well, home for me, I found this is really tragic and suburban, but honestly, I just like it when it's my mum, dad and 2 sisters in Kew. And church there and walking the dog around Richmond Park. But other than that, Winter Wonderland, because I'm also, I'm a little bit basic, so I do like all that kind
With
of...
an eggnog.
Yeah. Spend £300 in a day. No, I think the pubs are great I'm a Londoner like James, and London is sometimes quite a weird time at Christmas. I mean, I've always found it quite romantic when I listen to my parents talk about they'd lived in London in their 20s, but then they go back home and they get pissed up with their friends on Christmas Eve at the pub. So if London Christmases can be a bit... It really is you and the family, and you can walk around London as a ghost town. It's actually very nice. The river at Christmas, if you are in London, is just great because it's very empty, especially if you cycle down to sort of Chiswick and that weird, lovely period in between Christmas and New Year where there's kind of no rules and everything like that. So that's what
I do like the lights as well of sort of Oxford Street around there. We used to go and see that, and also the churches as well. So I went to St Paul's a couple of times last week, and that was really nice.
Yeah. If you want to see a really spectacular Christmas service, go to midnight mass at the London Oratory, where I think they have a full orchestra, and they perform some huge mass by Gounod or whatever. But you'll really need to start queuing early. Well, the first year I went, this was many years ago. I knew the parish priest. And so he let me and my sister and my mother in through a side door, so we cheated.
Very exclusive. And just to finish, I would like to ask you all what you would like for Christmas. Angus, you go first.
Socks, and then like a record player maybe. I've got very into actually Flora Watkins' piece last week about the Dying Art of the album.
Oh, yeah,
it's really made me...
I've
been trying to listen to more full albums all throughout the year, and it's great. And I've been meeting up with friends recently, and instead of fucking around with a playlist, I don't know if we can surround this, instead of messing around with the playlist, you can just say, what should we put on an album? And you just leave it going in the background for 70 or 80 minutes. So I've always liked the idea of having a record player.
I want a book on François Mitterrand. I read an excellent book on Charles de Gaulle and got me into French politics and the world that they never seem to die. They sort of hang around, and obviously Mitterrand's career spans from, I think, being a collaboratist in the sort of 40s up until 1995, where he dies a year later in 96. So yeah, looking forward to learning about that. And I love just sort of sitting there reading a couple of books. I think that'll probably be it. I'm really bad for Christmas presents, and I'm struggling, and my mum's like shouting at me for ideas. So
Well, let's hope she's listening.
I hope she's listening. So some socks as well, probably be a good thing. Or Bonnie Blue.
I would like something that I think would impart a nice, warm, seasonal glow to the entire nation, which is for the Duke and Duchess of Sussex to be stripped of their title.
I'll take world peace too.
I'll be in the King's Speech. And by the way, what would you like for Christmas, Lara?
Oh, thank you for asking. I would like some sleep, I think, first and foremost, and maybe some more of this delicious Berry Brothers Fino sherry.
It's very good.
It's very good, isn't it? Damian, James, and Angus, thank you very much for joining the edition and wishing everyone a very happy Christmas.